This is WAB's Week in Review, the show where we look back the last few days of stories from your WAB News team. I'm Alex Helmick, managing editor of WAB News. Coming up, hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding have gone out to states so schools can test their water for lead. Less than a quarter of Georgia school districts have done those tests, but one metro Atlanta school district went all in.
We can't do anything about the past. All we can do is do what's right about the future.
We'll have more in testing for lead in drinking water at Georgia schools in about 5 minutes. But first, we start with the FBI raiding Fulton County's election office on Wednesday. A county spokesperson said the agency was looking for records over the 2020 election. President Donald Trump narrowly lost to former President Joe Biden in Georgia. You may remember his phone call to Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger January 4th, 2021.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state, and flipping the state is a great testament to our country, because, you know, there's just, it's a testament that they can admit to a mistake, or whatever you want to call it, if it was a mistake. I don't know.
Republicans like Raffensperger and Governor Brian Kemp told Trump there were no votes to be found, there was no fraud, and the election was legit. Several audits showed Trump's claims of a stolen election were false. More than 5 years later comes this raid, where 700 boxes of 2020 election records were taken. Here's WABE's Shemaine Cruz.
When asked about the search, an FBI spokesperson said it had executed a court-authorized law enforcement action at the county's main election office. The county later confirmed the warrant sought a number of records related to 2020 elections, but did not provide any further information. The search comes after the county's clerk of Superior and Magistrate Courts, Shay Alexander, recently filed a motion to dismiss a lawsuit brought against her by the U.S. Department of Justice for access to those records. Multiple recounts and audits have confirmed Trump's 2020 loss to Joe Biden. His pressure campaign to allegedly undo that defeat culminated in the now dismissed sweeping election interference case brought on by Fulton District Attorney Fani Willis. Shemaine Cruz, WABE News.
The reactions to the search were swift and plentiful on both sides of the aisle. Fulton County Commissioner Chair Rob Pitts.
These records were the subject of active litigation and, quite frankly, were likely to be unsealed and turned over in a matter of weeks. We in Fulton County have nothing to hide.
Pitts also raised concerns about a state takeover of Fulton County elections. Republican Congressman Rich McCormick, whose district includes northern Fulton County, addressed that on Thursday.
If they're not being transparent, if they're not following the laws, if there's evidence that they're doing something wrong, of course. It's not going to happen willy-nilly. It's not going to happen without cause. The state, when it does something without cause, that shows a hierarchical overreach that we don't want to have. I don't think the state wants that.
The Republican-controlled state election board does have the power to replace county election boards. And, as WAB's Raul Bali tells us, concern for many is now pointed at this year's election.
Speaking on the House floor, surrounded by fellow Democrats, State Representative Syra Draper of Atlanta says the federal investigation is a pretext for what will happen next.
Will we take over the Fulton County Board of Elections? Because I think that's what the Trump administration wants. They want to take over Fulton County, which is not just the largest county in Georgia, it is the home to Atlanta. Because if they can take over bright blue Fulton County, they don't have to put forward good candidates. They don't have to compete.
The Republican-controlled state election board has the power to replace county election boards. Across the state capitol in the Senate, Republican Greg Dolezal of Cumming called Fulton's election security into question.
Lest you think Fulton County has cleaned up their voter rolls, today, thousands of people are registered to vote in Fulton County at UPS stores, storage units, pack mails, homeless shelters that haven't been open for over 5 years. The Fulton County voter rolls have been and continue to be a mess.
That's despite no evidence of widespread fraud during the 2020 election. Raul Bali, WABE News, the state capitol.
Switching gears now, as many students in Metro Atlanta walked out of school on Friday over actions by Immigration and Customs Enforcement across the country, notably Minnesota, ICE has opened a satellite office here to accommodate more administrative officers. ICE spokesperson Lindsey Williams confirmed to WABE a satellite office has opened around College Park but did not disclose the location. It's in addition to the existing ICE field office on Ted Turner Drive in Atlanta. Williams says the expansion isn't part of a coordinated Department of Homeland Security operation like those seen in Chicago and Minneapolis, but instead reflects the Trump administration's overall increase in immigration agents. Williams would not confirm the number of new ICE employees who will work out of the satellite office. ICE officers in Atlanta have also received newly branded SUVs. As promised by the Trump administration last year, they have red and gold striping, large ICE lettering on the sides, and on the rear, the gold embossed words, President Donald J. Trump. With that, and other actions like those in Minnesota, where a second U.S. citizen was recently killed during a targeted immigration operation by ICE, Georgia politicians are responding. WABE's Emily Wu Pearson told us about it.
Democrats on both the state and congressional level have spoken out against the killings. Here's Senator John Ossoff.
It is time for the masked federal agents who have been beating and killing American citizens to be restrained and held accountable.
State Democrats have introduced legislation aiming to restrict federal agents from concealing their identities and protecting places like schools and religious facilities during immigration raids in the state, citing the violence across the country as the impetus for these bills.
We are not powerless here.
That's State Representative Rua Roman of Duluth speaking at a press conference at the state capitol.
We can and must do more to protect our constituents.
Meanwhile, 2 Georgia congressional Republicans have openly supported the immigration operations. U.S. Representative Buddy Carter wrote in an opinion to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that the city needs more ICE and Department of Homeland Security resources to arrest undocumented immigrants, and he praised the federal operation in Minneapolis. U.S. Representative Mike Collins shared similar sentiments on social media, saying DHS and ICE should receive additional funding, and he stands behind law enforcement. Emily Wu Pearson, WABE News.
Well, the past several years, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has sent hundreds of millions of dollars to states so schools can test their water for lead. It's a water infrastructure program that also has a bearing on children's health and development. As WAB's Molly Samuel reported, a change in rules could make it easier for more Georgia schools to take advantage of the funding starting this year.
There is no safe level of lead to have in blood, according to the CDC. Lead exposure can damage brains and slow kids' development. It can cause low IQs and make it hard for students to pay attention in school. One of the ways children can be exposed to lead is through drinking water, if it's flowing through lead pipes or fixtures. So when officials at Gwinnett County Public Schools found out about the lead testing program,
we went all in.
Patrick Burke is the interim chief operations officer at the district.
The thought process is when we found this out, free testing available, we were going to take advantage of it.
With close to 180,000 students, Gwinnett County has the largest school system in Georgia. In fact, it's one of the biggest in the country. The district decided to test every school, more than 14,000 individual fixtures.
So we had people coming in 2, 3 in the morning sometimes because we had to be here before our cafeteria started doing their work, and it took quite a while to test the building, as you might imagine.
It also took an enormous amount of planning, having to identify and label every single faucet and water fountain they tested. Like this child height sink in a classroom at Lawrenceville Elementary School.
So we know this water does not have dangerous levels of lead in it.
Correct.
There used to also be a bubbler mounted on the sink, one of those curved water fountain fixtures. When they did the testing, there was lead detected in the water coming out of it. So Gwinnett did a relatively quick and easy fix. They removed the problem bubbler.
Replacing those fixtures is a fairly low-cost way to help resolve a problem.
Kevin McCumber is the regional administrator for the US EPA in the Southeast. He says Gwinnett voluntarily taking the initiative to test all its schools is a success story. The Georgia Department of Education has received close to $6 million from the EPA since the program began. Nationwide, the EPA has distributed around $200 million. About 17% of public schools in Georgia have enrolled in the initiative, and about 3% of child care facilities.
I'd love to see it go faster, but we're making progress, and that's what's important.
The state with far and away the most comprehensive testing nationwide is North Carolina, but there the testing is required by state law. Here, it's voluntary. RTI International, a nonprofit based in North Carolina, has a contract with Georgia to work with schools and districts to conduct the testing. Jennifer Hopenick-Redmond leads the environmental health and water quality team at RTI. She says at first they had to do a lot of convincing to get school officials interested in the program.
Funding is one concern.
Because even if the testing is free, administrators might be worried about what they find. What if they need to do major fixes?
Another concern certainly is potential outcry.
Like if a school does have lead, will there be negative media coverage, or will parents worry it's not a good place to send their kids? And Redmond adds, this program started during COVID, so school officials were distracted. But she says more recently, she feels like there has been more interest.
Not knowing whether there's lead in your drinking water or not does not mean it is not actually there. And I think our data have shown that it is pretty commonly found.
According to RTI, 60% of childcare facilities in Georgia that got testing done had at least one fixture that exceeded the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines for lead. More than 90% of schools did.
Once we find it, we can fix it.
And now schools in Georgia can get more help with that because the EPA changed the guidelines for the funding. Now the money can also be used not just for testing, but for fixes. RTI is rolling out with that change here in Georgia this year. And Redmond says she thinks that could make a difference for districts that might have otherwise been hesitant. In Gwinnett, the district spent more than $700,000 of its own funds for repairs and for staff overtime. Patrick Burke says other smaller districts would probably spend less. And he says, big picture, it wasn't a hard decision to move ahead with the program.
We can't do anything about the past. All we can do is do what's right about the future.
And that, he says, means doing what's right for kids. Molly Samuel, WABE News.
You're listening to WABE's Week in Review with me, Alex Helmick. Well, the Georgia Public Service Commission has entered a new era after nearly 2 decades with only Republicans. This month, 2 Democrats took their seats on the 5-member commission. They defeated Republican incumbents by a wide margin in November's election. One of the ousted commissioners, Republican Tim Echols, sat down with WABE climate reporter Emily Jones recently to reflect on his 15 years at the PSC and how climate change fits in to the commission's work.
Tim Echols carved an unusual path for a Georgia Republican, championing electric vehicles, alternative fuels, solar energy, and nuclear, often citing his faith as motivation to care for the planet. He also frustrated climate activists by supporting fossil fuel plants, too. Now he says the new Democratic commissioners will likely push for more climate action, though they may not have the votes to pull it off. We spoke just before he left office.
And a lot of people want to turn us into the Georgia Environmental Protection Division, and we're not that. We are really financial regulators. A lot of people do want to morph us into something that we're not.
I hear your point on that, but there are these kind of 3 pillars for the energy, right? Like safe, affordable, reliable. And, a lot of folks do make the argument that climate and emissions falls under safe. What is your take on that?
Climate change is a political issue, unfortunately, today. I mean, as an evangelical, I always talk about stewardship and that God's given us dominion on the planet, and we're to care for it. Water, air, soil, everything that we have. So that's how I approach it. I know my Emory friends and my Decatur friends and my left-leaning friends, they want me to go further. They want me to buy into Democratic talking points. And I just think it's unrealistic to ask a person in one party to go way out here on the edge, regardless of whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, and violate their party distinctives in order to do something. If we were appointed, if the commissioners were appointed by the governor, that's another thing, and you're nonpartisan. Most states have that. As long as you are partisan, I think you've got to expect partisan politics to play into your thinking and your messaging.
Well, I guess, how do you balance then where the party sort of tends to stand on climate and environmental issues with the creation care elements that you just mentioned that are such an important part of faith?
Well, we're sitting taping this in my 8th electric car. I have solar on my home, and Republicans have given me a hard time about these 2 things. And you might say that there was a dampening of enthusiasm for me from Republicans because of some of the positions that I've taken. So I think when you get out there off of the party platform, like I have on EVs and solar, you do put yourself at risk. So how far do you go?
More change could be coming for the Public Service Commission in this year's elections. One of the Democratic commissioners, Peter Hubbard, was only elected to a one-year term, so he's already running for re-election. His one-time opponent, Republican Fitz Johnson, has said he plans to try to win the seat back. And Republican Commissioner Tricia Pridemore is facing re-election as well.
Republicans, I think, are scared right now after seeing me go down, Fitz go down, and some other House of Representatives seats, some city seats in Roswell. Yeah, I think Republicans are at risk in 26. And obviously, if the commission does flip, if Tricia Pridemore loses her election and Fitz does not regain his seat, then it would be a 3-2 Democratic majority. They would be able to compel Georgia Power to do whatever they wanted to do.
Now that he's off the Public Service Commission, Eccles plans to run for the Georgia House of Representatives.
That was WABE climate reporter Emily Jones talking with former Public Service Commissioner Tim Eccles. Emily's reporting is part of a partnership with GRIST. That's all for the show this week. You can get more at WABE.org. I'm Alex Helmick. Thank you for supporting WABE and for listening to The Week in Review.